What's going on, boxing fans? It's Julian Williams with the distance. Kind of bit my tongue there. Anyway, welcome to the distance. I'm here for a prediction video. David Haye versus John Ruiz, WBA Heavyweight Championship, April 3rd, Manchester, England. Overall, really good test for David Haye. Won the WBA Heavyweight Championship against Nikolai Valuev, November the 7th. Beat him majority decision in a kind of an uneventful fight. It wasn't, a lot of people, including myself, actually fell asleep watching this fight. I definitely fell asleep watching it. And I know a couple other people who said they fell asleep watching, this David Haye Nikolai Valuev fight. But overall, with John Ruiz, David Haye is going to be getting a tough, rugged opponent, a solid heavyweight that he more than likely should have faced before trying to fight Klitschko for one of their heavyweight championships. But David Haye provides something in the heavyweight division that the Klitschkos really don't offer, and that's explosiveness. That's something that David Haye offers, explosiveness. You don't really get that with Vladimir and Vitaly Klitschko because they're a little safe. It's more jabbing, than power shots. But with David Haye, you're going to get more power shots, and other than power shots, you're going to get, I guess right off the bat, a bit more of an exciting fight rather than a technical boxing match that you get with the Klitschkos of consistently jabbing and setting up the power shots. In this fight against John Ruiz, David Haye has to fight very smart. We have to see in this fight, a very intellectual side of David Haye. We have to see if David Haye can adapt his style. We have to see, if David Haye comes in with a plan B, plan C, plan D, whatever. We have to see, David Haye in this fight more than likely have to change his style because John Ruiz is very tough and very rugged. He could, he's one of those fighters. Sometimes he's very hard to figure out at times, especially if at times you seem one-dimensional. Now, I'm not calling David Haye one-dimensional, but at the same time, with David Haye, a lot of his fights don't last long. Sometimes with David Haye, he doesn't really set up his power shots. He just throws his power shots right off the bat, which is good and well if it works for you, if you have the one-punch power to be able to do so. And with John Ruiz is a fighter, tough and rugged, likes to stay close to the fighter, does very well on the inside, and I believe is very underrated as far as the heavyweight outlook is concerned. I do think that John Ruiz is very underrated as far as skill goes. In this fight, for John Ruiz to win, John Ruiz is definitely going to need a knockout to win this fight. From my personal opinion, being that Manchester, England is David Haye's backyard, and a lot of people are vying to see this fight between Vladimir Klitschko and David Haye. I think that John Ruiz is definitely going to need either a knockout. He's going to have to definitely outwork David Haye. He wants to fight this fight in the inside. We haven't really seen David Haye fight necessarily 100% on the inside the way that John Ruiz does. David Haye kind of stands at his distance, and David Haye delivers that perfect 1-2 right in the chin. He has pretty decent hand speed, so with John Ruiz taking that range away from David Haye and staying in close, it pretty much takes that 1-2 away, and sometimes that 1-2 can knock you out, or it can set up David Haye's trademark haymaker or whatever. It's not necessarily a trademark, but it's his nickname anyway. But John Ruiz definitely needs to make this an inside fight. He needs to cut off all angles, which is what he does very well. Cuts off all the angles and and pretty much gets his shots off on the inside. That's really what John Ruiz needs to do in this fight. Nothing different. He doesn't want David Haye on the outside. He doesn't want David Haye to work from the outside. I think that John Ruiz needs to do all his work on the inside, and he needs to basically out-hustle, outwork, and and pretty much get his shots in before David Haye, even has room to breathe. because there's one thing I've seen with John Ruiz that he does very well. If you look closely at his fights, John Ruiz jabs his way to the inside. He does a very good job of jabbing his way to the inside, and when he gets on the inside, he does a very good job of landing that right uppercut. He lands actually a very perfect, very crisp right uppercut that lands right on the chin and is very precise and very accurate with it. So I do think that John Ruiz does need to cut off angles, needs to keep it on the inside, and throw the uppercut at times. Don't throw it all the time, but throw it at times, because in the Chicago fight he was trying to get the uppercut in all the time in that fight. So in this particular fight, he wants all his work done on the inside. And David Haye really needs to fight a very smart fight. For David Haye to win, David Haye does not want to square up with John Ruiz. That's a big no-no in this fight, because if David Haye squares up with John Ruiz, and then it's going to be a John Ruiz fight. David Haye kind of wants to stand at kind of an angle, and he wants to stand at a distance, and then he wants to get his shots in, but he wants to get out after he gets his shots off, after his shots land. That's really what David Haye needs to do. He needs to stay on the outside. He needs to set up his power shots from the outside, and he needs to stay out of the inside as much as possible. He really needs to keep Ruiz at the end of his shots, so that Ruiz doesn't get come on the inside. In order for Ruiz not to come on the inside, Haye needs to keep him at the end of his shots. Keep the fist out there. If he keeps the fist out there and he continually moves, if he can throw numerous combinations, John Ruiz will stay back. John Ruiz will not come on the inside. David Haye can land combinations from the outside, and possibly even set up John Ruiz for a knockout. Even though John Ruiz is a tough, rugged opponent, even though he's the type of fighter that's going to keep coming, and even though he's the type of fighter that could land very decent shots on the inside, David Haye has to take that in consideration and keep himself on the outside. And other than keeping himself on the outside, he just needs to. And there's another thing he needs to do. He does need to stay away from the ropes. And other than that, I think that's how David Haye wins the fight. I think staying on the outside and getting his power shots off from the outside, staying away from the inside. I think that's David Haye's way of winning this fight. A couple weeks ago, when I thought about this fight, I thought that John Ruiz would win this fight, just because, one, is his experience at heavyweight, two, his underappreciated skill at heavyweight, though people refer to him as one of the most boring or sometimes one of the worst champions ever, because he lost to two middleweights and he lost to value or whatever. But he's a veteran at the sport. He's come back from all these losses and won the championship. Eventually in his career won the championship. So I took a lot of that in consideration, especially after being knocked the fuck out by David too, a term I've been using quite a bit in my videos lately. But honestly, a couple weeks ago, if you asked me this question, I would have said John Ruiz. John Ruiz probably to a split decision, but with it being in David Haye's backyard, David Haye, being the new champion, and I think that David Haye's going to try his best to keep that heavyweight title belt, and I think that we're going to see the best David Haye on April the 3rd. This is hard to call, and this is a fight that I think can go either way, depending on how you look at it and how you score it and how you look at the careers. But I'm gonna go with this being a very tight, close fight, with David Haye getting the unanimous decision in the end. Though John Ruiz possibly will do enough to win the fight, I think David Haye will get the unanimous decision. But anyway, the fight takes place April 3rd. Doesn't even air here in the United States, I don't think. But anyway, that was the distance. Thanks for watching. Peace.